Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. This week I'm checking out the temporary Ranked Brawl queue, which came back for a few days. If the format's no longer available by the time you watch this, don't worry, as the format will be coming back starting June 23rd as a permanent Ranked Brawl queue, which will also be renamed to Competitive Brawl, since Competitive Brawl is a distinct format from the Brawl queue we're all familiar with, since both formats have a totally separate banned list. In this format, we get to play with a bunch of cards that were recently banned in Brawl, cards like Chrome Mox, Mana Drain, as well as Ancient Tomb and Strip Mine in the land department, cards that can be quite swingy. We also get to play with a bunch of more free spells, the entire cycle of Fierce Guardianship and Flawless Maneuver, cards that are free to cast when you control your commander. There's some powerful removal in black as well, so all these cards are also available. And we also get to play with cards that can prevent the opponent from casting their commander or activating it, cards like Meddling Mage and Drannith Magistrate, which are banned in Brawl, but available in this ranked mode, as well as all the Pithing Needle variants that can maybe shut down an opposing Planeswalker, which can be especially painful if your opponent is playing a Planeswalker as their commander. And then this format also has a banned list that includes a bunch of extra cards that are normally available in the regular Brawl queue, and these are both banned as commander as well as in the 99, and that includes cards like Tamio, Ajani, and Nadu, just to name a few. Ragavan and Rusko are on there as well. So again, a slightly different banned list, which means that the format is going to be quite a bit different than what you're used to. This week, my supporters on Patreon voted for Derevi, Empyrial Tactician, as our commander in this white, blue, and green, or banned Flash deck, which is trying to tempo people out and kind of control the game with lots of counter spells and card draw. So then if we take a look at our commander, it's a 3-mana 2/3 with flying, saying when Derevi enters and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may tap or untap target permanent. So we'll often use Derevi to untap our own lands, maybe untap our creatures if we want them back on defense, but occasionally we can also maybe mess with the opponent's lands or creatures by tapping them down, especially if we bring back Derevi in the opponent's turn, which we can do for 4 mana by putting Derevi onto the battlefield from the command zone. So we're not casting Derevi, we're putting it in play, which means our opponent cannot counter this with ordinary counter spells, and this also gets around the commander tax. So even if Derevi got removed multiple times, it's still only 4 mana to bring it back out of the command zone. So alongside commanders like Yuriko, this is one of the few ways we have of cheating on the commander tax. So that does make Derevi a pretty powerful commander, also gives us access to multiple colors, and we're gonna play it in this tempo deck where we have lots of flying creatures that can easily hit the opponent to help us untap our lands, so we can keep up more interaction while hopefully drawing a bunch of cards. So then if we take a look at our deck breakdown, I've split it up into a few different categories, starting with mana acceleration. We have lots of 1-mana accelerants, so we can already start deploying our more expensive spells ahead of schedule, maybe even cast a Derevi on turn 2. Especially cards that can make more than 1 mana, like Bloom Tender, are especially powerful with Derevi if we get to untap it and maybe generate 6 mana as early as turn 3. And then we've got our counter spells, since we are trying to play mostly at instant speed, since we can also put Derevi into play for 4 mana at instant speed, so it also complements all these counter spells quite nicely. Then we've got our removal, a lot of it at instant speed as well, and some enchantments here that can also maybe shut down opposing commanders for good, and these can also be a nightmare for some decks to deal with. Then we get to our author disruption and general interaction, including a bunch of ways to prevent the opponent from casting their commander, as we discussed with a Magistrate and Meddling Mage, and a bunch of other effects that can punish the opponent for maybe searching through their deck. And then we get to the card draw section, where we just have some powerful instants and sorceries, as well as some enchantments and planeswalkers that can reward us for hitting the opponent with our creatures, as we'll get to draw a card each time. So these also synergize very nicely with our smaller flying creatures and with Derevi. So that's our deck in a nutshell. Now for the deep dive, starting with the mana acceleration, we do get to play with Chrome Mox once again, imprint a card to make an extra mana. And then we've got our typical mana creatures, Avacys Pilgrim, Birds of Paradise, Delighted Halfling, Elvish Mystic, Llanowar Elves, and then Noble Hierarch is a nice pickup since we're in the banned colors. And then Utopia Sprawl does require a forest to enchant, but then if we maybe untap it with Derevi, that land can now make 2 mana, so that's also quite nice. Then the Banjo Mole Cub also synergizes well with all these previous creatures. And Bloom Tender, as we mentioned, can maybe make 3 mana multiple times in one turn thanks to Derevi. We've got a Talisman of Curiosity as our only ramp artifact outside of Arcane Signet, and then a Growth Spiral can also be played at instant speed to put an extra land into play. Uro, another individually powerful card that can make use of a full graveyard. Wilderness Reclamation can help untap our lands repeatedly, and since we're mostly playing at instant speed, we'll have plenty of ways to spend that mana in the opponent's turn. And then I Still Explorer is incredibly powerful with our fetch lands, but we now also have Strip Mine back in the format, so we can maybe lock people out with Strip Mine plus I Still. Then our counter spells include some cheap ones like Stern Scolding, as well as a Wash Away for opposing commanders. I like Reprieve and Romance as nice tempo plays, especially against more expensive spells. Daze can be played for free if we pick up an island. We also have the 5 mana Force of Will, which can pitch a blue card to be cast for free. Then Mana Drain is back, which can potentially give us a nice mana boost, alongside the classic counterspell. Dovin's Veto, a juiced up negate, alongside No More Lies, a slightly better mana leak. Then the Aven Interrupter can exile a spell, so it even gets around uncounterable effects. Fierce Guardianship is free as long as we control Derevi. Aang Swift Savior can airbend stuff. And then we've got our Spell Queller, which can also exile cheaper spells. Then we move on to our removal, where we have some instant speed options like Swords to Plowshares, as well as a Get Lost, which can also handle Planeswalkers and enchantments. And then a few enchantments here, Unable to Scream, and then both Eaten by Piranhas and Utter Insignificance, which can totally shut down an opposing creature and remove its abilities. And since we're mostly attacking with flying creatures, we can sort of ignore a 1/1 on the ground, and especially if this is enchanting an opposing commander, we're in a great spot. And then there's a Loran for artifacts and enchantments, a Borrower to bounce stuff, and then a nice 3/1 flyer. Wandering Emperor can be flashed in to exile a tapped creature, and then Solitude can also exile things similar to Swords to Plowshares, can be played for free if we evoke it by pitching a white card. Then our Disruption includes a few taxation effects like Esper Sentinel, drawing cards when the opponent casts a non-creature spell. Mother of Runes can be awesome if we get it in play early, as it can simply tap to give protection from a certain color, can also protect itself. There's a Mausoleum Wanderer and Judge's Familiar as small flyers that can be sacrificed to counter instant and sorcery spells. And then we've got the Magistrate and Meddling Mage to prevent the opponent from casting their commander in the first place. We also have the Plume Creed Escort to give a creature hexproof at instant speed. And then Aven Mind Sensor can punish opposing search effects like fetch lands and other ramp cards, as the opponent now only gets to look at the top 4, so they may fail to find what they're looking for. Flawless Maneuver can make our team indestructible. We've got Tishana's Tidebinder to counter activated and triggered abilities. And then Vendilion Clique gives us a bit of hand disruption, stapled onto a 3/1 flyer. And then our card draw has Brainstorm, which is great with all the shuffle effects from our fetch lands to maybe get rid of some unwanted cards. And then Consult the Star Charts is great, especially if we kick it. Fairy Mastermind will punish the opponent for drawing cards, can also activate it, especially in the opponent's turn, to help us draw 2 cards. We've got Malcolm, which will help us loot as it hits the opponent. Stock Up, a nice 2-for-1, looking at the top 5. And then we've got a bunch of these effects that reward us for hitting the opponent. Binding of Thassa, Enduring Curiosity, as well as Toski and even Tamio can all reward us for hitting the opponent and hopefully draw lots of cards in the process. We also have Jace the Mind Sculptor, another Brainstorm effect with our fetch lands, but can also bounce creatures or maybe Fate Seal someone with a +2. And then there's Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, as it can untap 2 lands, so it's kind of like a mini Wilderness Reclamation stapled onto a card-drawing Planeswalker. And then the Librarian, another way to punish the opponent for searching through their deck, and also just a powerful flash flyer that can draw extra cards. And then the mana base has 2 of each basic, trying out a few different arts. And then we also have the Shock lands and Surveil lands in each color pair, which we can easily find with all the fetch lands, which are also great with Brainstorm and Jace. And then our remaining mana fixing, including a few channel lands for added interaction, as well as, of course, Strip Mine to blow people out, especially paired with the I Still Explore. No Ancient Tomb, since we have a lot of intense color requirements, so 2 colorless mana would not be all that useful, but it is certainly an option. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play, facing Kefka, Grixis control. Yeah, their commander provides a ton of card advantage, so we don't want it to hit the table if possible. This hand seems keepable. Can start by surveilling and then getting a Badger Mole involved. Opponent has a library, so that'll give them a leg up. So we need to apply a lot of pressure to try and get kind of underneath the library if we can. Ganjo I'll keep for now just to make sure we don't miss our upcoming land drops. Opponent draws with library. And a subtlety evoked. Fair enough. Do I want to draw Badger Mole next turn? It's not bad with a fetch land. But yeah, now our opponent did have to pitch a card. So they can play a land and then library. They need to library first. Opponent pitching the Illuminating Lash. Okay, so let's just do this. And pass. So our opponent's still with 7 cards in hand. Can get another Surveil. Opponent taking out the Badger Mole. That's fine. So now they can no longer library. Memory lapse seems fine. Okay, so this turn might want to go for Derevi. Could also do it in the opponent's upkeep to tap down a land. Could make it library so they cannot draw for turn and then activate library again. Could go for the blue source if we're worried about counter spells. Let's go with the blue source. Alternatively, could have also untapped my own land so we could still memory lapse. So our opponent will just activate library. So this is a good turn to kind of stock up. And Croxa to make me discard. Fair enough. So, what do we get rid of? Could be the Guardianship, because Memory Lapse is currently my only real answer to Kefka. Although having a free counterspell that can negate stuff is nice. But I don't want to lose my 2-for-1s either. And get another blue Surveil. And Jace could be pretty decent too. Can play Jace, untap a land, still have Memory Lapse up. And then, do we Brainstorm? Could still find another fetch. Mana Drain, Escort. Okay, so don't need Mana Drain in hand, and I'm not gonna play the birds. Something like this seems fine. So then we have Escort and Memory Lapse up right now. 4 cards in graveyard, opponent's gonna keep on using a library. Talisman resolves. I'm not opposed to just playing the Escort to up the pressure a little bit. Alright, so then first we want to cast, let's say, a Stock Up. Could also first Brainstorm and then Stock Up to kind of get rid of the top cards. Ice Still is excellent if we can resolve it. So then say no to the birds. And yeah, this is tough. Because I want to go some Petal Growth, play Ice Still, so I still have Mana Drain and Memory Lapse up. And then I can still play Fetch and untap more lanes. So maybe Stock Up is the card I don't need. Although that kind of feels wrong. Yeah, let's just say no to Memory Lapse. So then can play Ice Still with Counterspell backup. Opponent had their own Mana Drain. I get to Mana Drain the Mana Drain. And then attack. Question is whether I want to play a land and mill the Memory Lapse or keep it there. Another thing I could have considered is attacking first to tap down the opponent's stuff. Could also technically consult into the Memory Lapse. Because yeah, we will get to Mana Drain mana here actually. So then I think it works out where I can stock up and then draw into the Memory Lapse and then still keep it available. Okay, I think we figured it out. And then Wash Away also looks great. Brazen Borer also an option. But I'll just take more counters. And then play the Fetch. Okay, so now we've got multiple answers in hand for Kefka. And we're applying a good bit of pressure so they can just sit back and win with Library. Opponent getting Blood Crypt untapped for a Vampiric Tutor. Possible they're getting a discard effect or a board wipe. Maybe they can cast a Sweeper with Counterspell backup. Damnation. Yeah, kind of looks like Sweeper with Counterspell backup, doesn't it? Still have a Jace at least. Opponents off the Library plan. And sink into Stupor. Alright, so back to the command zone. And Enduring Curiosity, a great draw. So Jace could now maybe start plussing on the opponents. They're probably gonna run out either Kefka or Kroxa next turn. My hand's pretty good, wouldn't mind hitting another lane drop admittedly. And then unable to scream, and no more lies can go for now. So then we'll just pass with the plan of putting Derevi back into play, maybe alongside Enduring Curiosity. Opponent looks to be escaping Kroxa, which I'm happy to Memory Lapse. Opponent had another counterspell. Okay, so then I can go for Derevi, untap a land, and still Wash Away. I suppose Wash Away is only 1 mana if I try and use it on Kroxa, since it's not cast from hand. So could have also tapped down the opponent's land. Don't think I'll be consulting without kicker. Alright, and then now I don't mind a main phase Enduring Curiosity. Can also Fate Seal myself. But I think I still prefer the Brainstorm. And a Strip Mine would have been awesome with the Explore. For now, put these two back. Can main phase Curiosity. Attack. And then Meddling Mage can name Kefka. Kroxa cannot be escaped until they sack the fetch land. Let's see. They have the right colors even if I were to strip mine. But I think I still run it out so we can play Kicked Consult here. Opponent will fetch. So, yeah, Kroxa will probably resolve. I think we'll be alright. Jace can just bounce their Titan. And then clear a path for an attack. So then, in response, I can play Kicked Consults. Maybe hang on to the No More Lies. And find Maneuver, in case our opponent's got another Sweeper left. And maybe a Dovin's Veto at this point as well. Spell Queller could also maybe counter Kroxa if they replay it. But No More Lies is running out of utility now. Opponent's got enough lands in play. So I just need to protect my board, bounce Kroxa and attack. Opponent had a Thoughtseize. Do I maneuver now? Opponent would just respond if they have instant speed removal. So it doesn't seem worth it. But yeah, with one card remaining, I can't think of much that'll save them here. A Psychic Frog. So that is an extra blocker, but can just bounce Kroxa and attack. And that'll do it. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Aang, Swift Savior, so blue-white kind of tempo deck. It's quite similar to what we are doing. My hand seems acceptable. Don't think the Wanderer's gonna shine, since it just gets ambushed by Aang, so we can pitch it to a Chrome Mox, so I keep up Counterspell turn 1. And then we can try and get a Jace in play as soon as possible. So end of turn we can Surveil. Banter Molekup seems decent. Can Earthbend onto the fetch lanes. Does mean I'm shields down on Counterspell right now. Opponent's gonna Swords onto the Cub, that's fine. So then now if I sack the fetch, I'll get a land and still get the fetch lane back. But the Scalding Tarn will enter tapped. So no double blue. And Momo resolves. And they still had an Architect as well, alright. That one's pretty good. Although a Derevi can get in the way. Unable to Scream could also be an answer. Although opponent can use Aang to airbend their own creature. So it's not the best answer we could draw here. Wilderness Wreck is probably worth going for, although won't quite have enough for Wilderness Reclamation and put Derevi into play. Would just be Reclamation, keep up Counterspell. But maybe that's good enough, just giving me more mana going forward. Even though I have to sack the fetch land, which I would have liked to keep for Jace. Could have also considered getting a second white or green source. Alrighty, so... And now we could also do things like put Derevi in, tapping an opposing land so they don't have double blue, and I maybe get to resolve something. But yeah, for right now, I guess we just cast Derevi and we're happy if our opponent counters it, since we'll just untap our lands and be able to replay it in the opponent's turn. Opponent's gonna cast Aang, which I can just counterspell. And then can untap the Chrome Mox for what it's worth. And then next turn I can Jace with Guardianship backup. Derevi blocks their creatures reasonably well. They can still cast Aang thanks to the discount for Momo, if they main phase it. And a Skyclave Apparition, going for the Wilderness Reclamation. Yeah, cannot Guardianship that one, sadly. Okay, so next up, still don't hate going for Jace with Mother of Runes. So let's start here. And we'll Brainstorm. Could also bounce, let's say, the Skyclave to get a 4/4 token, but then they can Skyclave Jace again. Found a fetch and an Ice Still. If I attack with Derevi, it would allow me to still play Meddling Mage, but I think I want to keep the Guardianship as well. Yeah, I can put these two back. Still draw the Meddling Mage. And then no attacks. Hopefully they don't have multiple answers to be able to attack Jace. Can stop one removal spell. Although if they just play Aang to airbend Derevi, then I guess Jace would be susceptible. So there was an argument for playing the fetch, attacking, and being able to then play Meddling Mage. But yeah, opponent going for Cryptic Command, played right into our Guardianship. Unless they've got their own free counterspell here. And yeah, they actually had a Force of Will. Pitching a Lofty Denial. So Derevi can go back to hand. And if I want to save Jace, I need to lose Mother of Runes. Which is probably still worth it. So then, this turn, I could play Ice Still and Meddling Mage. If I +2 Jace, I can keep it alive, since I'll be able to Meddling Mage on Aang. So yeah, that seems like the play here. And now Strip Mine plus Ice Still is incredibly powerful if we can get that going. So Meddling Mage, naming Aang Swift Savior. And then just +2, target my opponents. Could also target myself, but I'm about to probably shuffle again. And I did not mean to get rid of the land. Click through it a little bit too quickly. So Jace takes 2 damage. Can keep some uncracked fetch lands to combine with the Brainstorm at some point. And Harbinger, who... that's gonna shut off my Strip Mine lock. And then I could get more basics. Or I could just Surveil one last time. Yeah, Harbinger was the perfect answer to the Strip Mine here. Don't have a ton of double green spells, cannot get basic planes. So I may as well Surveil. First mill, then Surveil. And look for an answer to the Harbinger. Could always bounce it with Jace, and then Reprieve could maybe bounce it again. So I can sacrifice my Jace in order to Strip Mine my opponent a bunch. I think that's worth it. Is there anything better I can come up with? Yeah, it seems fine to me. And then I may want to strip mine their planes, so that if they do play Harbinger, they don't have white mana. But I think we can just prevent them from casting it in the first place. And then I can still play Derevi. Could have attacked with Ice Still, and then untapped it. Could also just tap down their lands. Still have Reprieve up. Alright, so pass it back. And yeah, we can just strip mine, lock our opponents. Derevi blocks the small flyers. They cannot cast Aang. And our opponent scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Nashi. So a Sultai flash deck with lots of powerful spells. This hand's okay. Could use some counter spells, maybe some bigger card draw effects. But a Sentinel could be effective, as our opponent starts out with a Preordain. Can save the fetch now. Bloom Tender into Derevi is a powerful curve, making a lot of mana, assuming all the pieces survive. Because you can play Derevi with a trigger on the stack, tap Bloom Tender for 3 mana, untap it, and then still have 3 mana going forward. Does a Sentinel want to attack? There are some flash creatures that could get in the way. I think I still try it with Get Lost up, and then play Bloom Tender second main. The chip damage does add up. And Bloom Tender has the highest upside. That resolves. Could see a Sweeper. Toxic Deluge for 3 mana comes to mind. Would still at least draw a card of Sentinel. Opponent is just going to pass with 3 mana up. So yeah, we have options. Can make the play I described with Derevi. If they counter my commander, it's not a disaster. So a Rainforest fetch, just a island seems fine. Could also save the fetch for Brainstorm, but I think we're going to stock up this turn, assuming the Derevi play works out. So yeah, let's get an island. And then I want to be in full control for this, so I can make sure I can respond to Derevi's trigger. Cast it for 3. Opponent just uses Counterspell, presumably paying the tax. That's fine. I mean, we don't get to make 6 mana here, but they use a Counterspell on our commander, which we can easily redeploy from the command zone. And then now play Talisman. Still have Brainstorm up for what it's worth. Opponent can make an uncounterable Nashi. Yeah, that makes a big difference, although we do have a Get Lost to just destroy it. So when it enters, they still get to make a duplicate. Alright, so does have Ward 2 as well, good to keep in mind. So I could go for Derevi in my turn, so we can do the Bloom Tender trick. Yeah, I think I tried again. So full control. Get this back. Target Bloom Tender. Make 3 mana, untap, and then make 3 mana once again. So then now I could start with Brainstorm or Stock Up. Start with a Stock Up. And I probably want access to more blue mana here. Finding, I guess, Memory Lapse, and let's go with a untapped land. Okay, and then I can still Brainstorm. Mastermind's good, Eaten by Piranhas is good. Get rid of some lands. And then if I wanted to, I could still shuffle and play the Masterminds. Because I'm expecting my opponent to just go for Nashi. This is weak in the face of a sweeper, admittedly. And no attacks. So there's Nashi. So they probably got another counterspell here. And they can get some more green mana in circulation. They tend to have a lot of flicker effects as well to combo with Nashi. Take 4. And a dig through time. Alright, opponent lets us draw with Sentinel once again, opponent's tapped out. So, yeah, don't hate my spots with a lot of permission spells. Can deal with Nashi if we really want. And we've got a big mana advantage thanks to Bloom Tender. Main things to watch out for are free counter spells like Force of Will. Alright, now we don't want our opponent chaining together extra turns, so that's still a concern. But let's see here. So I can start by tapping Bloom Tender, maybe answering Nashi. Could just Get Lost it, could Eaten by Piranhas it, but then if they flicker it, they still get it back. So Get Lost is the cleanest answer. That works. Now I can attack. Untapping Bloom Tender for even more mana. Could also untap another land and maybe activate my Mastermind. Okay, so activate Mastermind, maybe using Bloom Tender, so I don't waste any mana. Opponent already has a million cards in hand anyway. And then pass a turn. Can still activate Mastermind if we'd like. Reprieve does get around Cavern of Souls if they want to replay Nashi, although they did leave it in the graveyard. They're going to kick things off with a Duress. So, yeah, I guess we Memory Lapse the Duress. So they can't immediately replay it. Our opponent had the counter spell they got earlier from Nashi. So actually, an interesting play we could make now is to reprieve our own Memory Lapse. That way the counter spell fizzles, we get Memory Lapse back, get to draw a card, and then I could still Memory Lapse the Duress if I really wanted to. Or we could also just activate the Mastermind here, but yeah, our opponent has seen enough. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Withr black-white control. This hand's pretty rough, missing a second land. If I find one, I can maybe play the Signet and then unlock Llanowar Elves and Banter Mole. But as it stands, it's pretty sketch. This is better. One card has to go, no free mulligans in this format. Tidebinder might be a little bit more situational. Having access to Reprieve to maybe stop 7 mana play is quite nice. Soul Surge, gonna have a look. So that can take away my counterspell. Takes a Growth Spiral. So we'll get to Surveil. Consult for a bit of card advantage is nice. So if we don't need to reprieve anything, we can play Malcolm. Opponent probably has some removal up. So I'm not counting on being able to play Derevi to then still untap 2 lanes. But that would be nice. Did not seem like they had anything in hand. So maybe it's worth the risk. Now of course our opponent's deck might have a bunch of sweepers as well. So I get to untap my lanes and then loot with Malcolm. Dovin's Veto is going to be effective. What do I get rid of? All these cards are good. I don't really want to give up on my land. Maybe Reprieve is the most situational, but it's the best right now. Would love to slam down a Tamiyo. So maybe Consult has to go and then just leverage Tamiyo for card advantage. Feels bad, but I think it's the way to go. So then I've already played a land for turn, so can pass it back. And yeah, opponent did have a Toxic Deluge, so I don't actually mind reprieving it, kind of locking them into recasting it again next turn. Days would have been fun. So then now I can go for Tamiyo. And then I'll be able to untap 2 lands to still cast a Veto.
I would like to ask about any lunar anomalies you have experienced.
While drawing a bunch of cards.
Is always welcome.
So that's a lot of triggers. And a Wilderness Reclamation would be very effective too. Discard. Don't think Stern Scolding is going to be useful. Pass a turn. Opponent's going to Deluge again. We can Veto, still have Days up. They actually cast Deluge for just 1, because they were trying to clear a path for Fracture, but turns out we have the Days. So now we've got another turn of drawing multiple cards with Tamiyo and Malcolm, and our opponent scoops it up. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Gut, mono-red aggro. Definitely going to be a tough matchup. Opponent might also have some hate for non-basic lanes. But yeah, we've got some cheap counter spells to hopefully get to the good stuff. And then turn 1, could just fetch a forest. This makes white. Sure. And then next turn, getting a Bloom Tender going with Derevi would be sweet. Opponent with a Plunderer to give me extra treasure. Not gonna trade. And Days was a nice pickup, although would like me to have an island in play ideally. Of course, a Plunder making treasure also fuels Gut, but we can answer that one. So, let's see. Does make a tapped treasure. So this turn it's still probably safer to just keep up some interaction. And then next turn I can play the Bloom Tender. So I can reprieve. Ideally I would use Remand first, since this actually counters in case a Cavern of Souls shows up later. But the mana works out better this way, so I can fetch a tapped Surveil. Still taking a bit of damage. So let's get a Hedge Maze, perhaps. And Hinterland Harbor. I would prefer finding a basic island that I can maybe pick up with the days, so I don't have to pick up a tapped land. So now we've got options. Could go for Derevi, and then untap my land. Pilgrim can also attack to untap a land. Still play a Bloom Tender, for instance. Don't hate that sequence. Could also put in Derevi in the opponent's turn to be able to tap down a Plunder, for instance. So my Pilgrim gets to make a mana while dealing 1 damage this way. And then if I play the Bloom Tender, I would be unable to remand. Still have days up, but opponent can pay for it, so I think for now I still pass. And then we can maybe flash in the Mastermind if we don't have to counter anything. And now with the extra treasure it's going to be easier to deploy the rest of my hand. So Gut is back, I'll remind it. If they play a land and cast it again, I will get them with a daze. Opponent might have some redirection effect. Abrade Derevi, that's fine. Could even daze it if I'd like. Yeah, maybe that's worth a tempo advantage. Could also just counter Gut, but then the remand fizzles and I don't get to draw a card. But it would make it then cost 5 mana going forward. I think I just keep the Derevi, pick up Hedge Maze. And then Derevi can help empty my hand. We've got a mana sink with the Mastermind, even though it's not the most exciting one. But no, opponent's just gonna scoop it up here, I'll take it. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Dragonlord Ojutai, so presumably blue-white control. So having our own counter spells could be important. This hand seems functional. Could immediately play Mother of Runes turn 1 to demand an immediate answer. Although a board wipe can still clean it up, ignoring the protection. Now that we drew Hallowed Fountain, it seems worth it. Can save the fetch to maybe Surveil. And yeah, having lots of plays we can make at instant speed is good against control in general. Opponent forced to immediately Swords to Plowshare the Mother. So that feels like a win. As Swords is one of the best answers to Enduring Curiosity. So probably fine to Signet. And then, yeah, next turn we might already be able to flash in a Curiosity. Did seem like they were holding priority, so they could have like a Daze or a Force of Will in hand. So, yeah, just play a land and pass, and then, depending on what our opponent does, could also go for Derevi. Maybe tapping an opposing land. Yeah, I mean, I do not have an answer to Ojutai right now. So I could Derevi in their next upkeep so they don't have 5 mana to cast it. Not sure that they would want to tap out for it right away. I really want a Curiosity to resolve, so I think we still go for Derevi here. Tap down one of your lands. And this is not something they can counter. So if I can get them to tap out, that would be nice. Our opponent with a Fateful Absence, that's fine. Back to the command zone, where we can get it back for just 4 mana. And I will decline to untap the land. So yeah, since they're keeping up 2 mana again, I like just going for Derevi. Tap down your land so you cannot play the Ojutai. And I think that's it. This does maybe give them the information that we do not have a clean counterspell for Ojutai. Otherwise we would have just kept up mana. Opponent goes for Snapcaster into maybe Fateful Absence again. That would be pretty good in my view. Swords to Plowshares, not much different. Alright, so they've answered Derevi a second time. But that's not really how you win this matchup, in my opinion. Still no permission spell on our side. So I wouldn't be able to necessarily stop Ojutai if they go for it. So then what's my plan? Maybe I go for Librarian in response to their fetch. So I can cast one, X equals 4, X equals 3 if I want to play around a Daze, for instance, or just X equals 2 if I also want to keep up Mastermind and the Clue, which is probably good enough. So let's do that. Upside of making a larger Librarian is that we maybe get to attack into Ojutai more reliably. But assuming this works, it would already be up to a 4-4. Opponent did have a Force of Will, as it turns out. Okay. So no Librarian. We are still pretending that we might have a counterspell up for Ojutai. And yeah, as the dust settles, our opponent is low on resources. So they might just have to go for it since they don't have a choice. Can always just chump it with Derevi over and over. So I don't really hate my spot. Could have also considered Tidebinder on the fetch lane to counter the trigger, but opponent's just gonna hit for 2 with Snapcaster. And yeah, they're going for Ojutai since we kinda forced them into a corner. So I can sack the Clue, maybe draw Force of Will, but Brazen Borrower. So this has hexproof as long as it's untapped. It does not inherently have vigilance, but they might be able to give it vigilance. So yeah, for now I'm not in any danger since we have multiple answers for a tapped Ojutai. It is tempting to Tidebinder them here. And then I'll still have Wandering Emperor. Yeah, I mean, the safer play would maybe still be Derevi. Just jump Ojutai in case they have a counterspell left in hand for the Emperor. And then I can Emperor Ojutai my turn. So then I just tap a land. Might see more instant speed removal on Derevi. Yeah, they actually do. Alright, so Ojutai will hit me. Ooh, I accidentally left Derevi in exile. I thought I was declining the untap trigger here, but well, that's a problem. I just sent my commander to the exile zone for no reason. Alright, this is going to be a game in hard mode. I still feel like we can win, but I did make it 10 times harder on myself now. Yeah, usually it says, "Are you sure?" when making dumb decisions, but this time we're not given such precautions. So Ojutai finding the best among the top 3. Plays a land. Alright, let's try the Wandering Emperor. That works.
I hope you're ready to lose.
And then Curiosity.
You're done.
Attack with Tidebinder. Draw a card. They could also animate the Great Hall if they want to attack the Wanderer. Or they can replay Ojutai. It's going to be a cryptic command, bouncing Curiosity, so they can attack my Planeswalker. Fair enough. So just going to main phase Curiosity. Attack, draw card. And then still have Masterminds available. So we are starting to snowball some card advantage. But now we also have to watch out for a sweeper. Keeping Borrower to bounce Ojutai if it ever attacks. Castle Ardenvale could also matter. Still feel inclined to want to play the Mastermind since it gives me another flying attacker for the Enduring Curiosity. Don't really need Bloom Tender. I will take a counterspell, haven't drawn any so far. But yeah, this would have been a great spot for Derevi if I still had it in the command zone. Pay 4 mana, maybe tap your Castle Ardenvale, force you to use it. But let's see if we can win without our commander. Opponent had a reprieve, that's fine, just replay it. They were briefly looking at the graveyard, maybe some Delve card, Dig Through Time comes to mind. Opponent's just gonna activate the Great Hall. Get Lost, not a bad draw. Get Lost on the Great Hall seems like a fine starting point. And I'm fine trading for Snapcaster. Opponent falls to 9. And draw 2 cards. And Daze and Wash Away. I finally got my counter spells. Alright, so play Fetch and Pass. Can activate Mastermind in the opponent's turn if we want. Supreme Verdict, that one's uncounterable. So I will activate Mastermind on the way out. Dovin's Veto doesn't stop Supreme Verdict, sadly. I think I do flash in a Brazen Borrower end of turn now, since then we'll still have the enchantment from Curiosity to draw more. And we can hopefully counter Ojutai. Alrighty, so hit for 3 draw card. Could maybe Surveil first, and yeah, opponent scoops it up. So, despite exiling my commander, we still managed to rank up to Diamond. Awesome. So yeah, banned Derevi, a pretty interesting tempo deck that has a nice mix of mana acceleration, permission spells, and other flash cards. So yeah, there's a lot of powerful commanders out there in the current ranked queue. I don't think Derevi is necessarily the best one, but if you enjoy this flash playstyle, then this is definitely one of the better options out there. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.